The Mandalorian Season 3. I'm back from my hibernation. Anyway, The Mandalorian. Now, the first two seasons left me feeling very satisfied with the story that was told. But after what happened in the Book of Boba Fett, such as The Mandalorian and Grogu being reunited so quickly, it left me quite apprehensive for this third season. Trailers didn't really make me feel any more optimistic because it looked like the focus was shifting from Din and Grogu and more towards Mandalorian culture as a whole, and I think the thing that's been fun about this story is just kind of these two people working together in order to just stay alive and protect one another, but now it's obviously trying to develop into this big lore-based thing. This was the case for Season 3, and unfortunately I think it has majorly dropped off compared to those prior two seasons because it seemed to shift its focus onto too many characters, too many subplots, and not really spending nearly enough time with Din and Grogu, who are the heart of the show, and I think it was just trying a little bit too hard with things like fan service, trying to include lots of things and mention lots of things. The story for this season is really about taking back Mandalore, uniting the Mandalorians and just taking back the planet. So of course this includes Din, Bo-Katan, Din's tribe who keep their helmets on, and then Bo-Katan's old group who take their helmets off. And whilst they're trying to do all this, there are some minor threats such as big animal monsters, there are rogue droids, there's beef between the Mandalorian tribes, and eventually the bigger threat, which is the return of Moff Gideon, which was a disappointing return for his character. And in all this, it feels like Din and Grogu are barely the focus apart from that first episode, and after that it just feels like a bit of a mess of trying to juggle way too many characters and way too many plot lines. The first two episodes of Season 3 didn't wow me. It was kind of starting to roll with this idea that the season was going to be about reclaiming Mandalore, and it didn't really excite me, and it still didn't really feel like there was a goal that these characters were aiming towards, like something definitive, but I could still roll with it. I still would consider it adequate. I still wanted to carry on watching in the hope that things would get a little bit more exciting as it went on. Where it went horribly wrong was in episode 3, which was the longest episode in the season, and it was dedicated to Dr. Pershing and the former Imperial girl who used to work under Moff Gideon. This was a real snore fest. It barely had anything to do with the Mandalorian and Grogu, and it started to sort of unveil what this show has secretly been trying to aim towards. We all assumed from the previous seasons what Moff and the Remnant Empire were up to with their attempts to acquire Grogu. They wanted his blood, and we also saw multiple back-to-tanks in the past which we assumed meant cloning. This sparks fear, because we all know what happened in The Rise of Skywalker, and it created this worry inside me that The Mandalorian was actually going to be like a segue into the sequel trilogy. Season 3 and the finale episode especially have made this more apparent. We learn that the Empire wanted Pershing so he could perform the tests and experiments regarding cloning, and we see that Moff has created clones of himself that have been made to be force sensitive, presumably using Grogu's blood, but they're very, very quickly just killed off. You see him for about half a minute and then that's it. And that's really a theme of this season. Everything is introduced and shut down very quickly. It's all short-lived and tucked under the rug so we can move on to something else, and it ends up feeling like we had about 30 little subplots throughout this season. And in general, that's been the problem with this season. It feels like there's been no real goal from episode 1 to episode 8 apart from reclaim Mandalore, but that's not really like a clear goal. There's not really a clear idea behind that task, and it also doesn't feel like a task that's very pressing. It just feels like it's something that the Mandalorian, obviously Din, sort of thought, well, that would be something to do now that I'm not being chased by the Empire. It felt like he had time to kill, and this was something to do. Season 1 of The Mandalorian was clear and exciting. Protect the child from the threat of the Empire. Season 2 was clear and exciting. Protect the child from the threat of the Empire, and also reunite him with the Jedi. Season 3 feels a little hard to define, and honestly, it just gets me a bit riled up thinking about it, because Season 2 ended so perfectly, and it brings me to one of the main problems of Season 3. Grogu. I love Grogu, we all do, but because he was no longer the main thing, the thing that needed protecting or delivering or saving, he was just a bit of a meaningless inclusion in this season. And it does make you wonder why the writers went out of their way in the first place to ruin the Book of Boba Fett by turning it into The Mandalorian 2.5, abruptly and conveniently reuniting The Mandalorian and Grogu, taking away all the powerfulness and meaningfulness of that season 2 finale whilst also kicking Boba Fett off his own show. And all this just to have Grogu occasionally make a cute noise or do a backflip or do a little force push in the 3rd season without actually serving the plot. This season also had a lot of filler. Now, The Mandalorian's no stranger to filler, but in the past those filler episodes have at least been fun, or at least the non-filler episodes around them that are serving the plot have actually served the plot and actually been very, very strong episodes. So when you got the occasional filler, you didn't really mind that much. Like, maybe you didn't feel like you took a step forward, but it felt like you still got entertained. Episodes 3, 4, 5, and 6 of season 3, I'd say, were filler. And they weren't very good ones on that, and that of course is half the season. Episodes 1, 2, 7, and 8, I would say, were the ones that really seemed to focus on the plot, and they weren't that great, and it just makes you think if those middle 4 episodes weren't spent doing just little side quests that didn't really serve the story, they could have at least told this story that they were attempting to tell a little better. This season still had some moments, it had those glimpses of what made it so great in the past, but unfortunately those moments just seemed to be rooted in a plot that just didn't excite me. I think what made The Mandalorian so great before was this whole thing of this badass Lone Ranger who was out to do a job and decided to go against what he was meant to do because, you know, he felt what he was doing was wrong, which was, of course, having to deliver the child to the Empire, and he felt like he needed to protect him. He was a hero to us viewers because of that. We all loved him and Grogu, and they were the duo. They were all I really wanted to see from this show. I like the addition of the side characters, of course, like Bo-Katan and Boba Fett and Greef Karga and Cara Dune, Ahsoka. But what I really wanted solely was Mando and Grogu center stage. That was lost in this season. It felt like they went to the side and just fell down the pecking order, and it saddens me because this show felt like Star Wars revived, but now it feels like, once again, Disney have sunk it. I don't really see where we go from here. The Mandalorians now have Mandalore. Mando has a house as he watches over Grogu and he wants to do some work hunting down remnants of the Empire, and Moff is seemingly dead. Because of this, if they do another season, I'm hoping we can just go back to Mando and Grogu just doing their thing, you know, just doing their thing, you know, whatever that would be, doing some bounty hunting. But of course, with like the threat of the Empire, for now at least, you know, suppressed and they're not being chased, you know, even that would feel like it's not really heading anywhere. It would just feel like the adventures of Din and Grogu rather than, you know, a real weighty plot. But now it feels like Disney is trying to do with Star Wars what they did with Marvel, which is make this big intertwining universe with TV shows and movies crossing over, characters maybe bouncing from one show to the next and setting up things. And we all know that if you spend time in a TV show or movie trying to set up other things, you just take away from that show in particular. And of course, recently at the Star Wars Celebration event that they do every year, they announced quite a lot of new projects, and it just has me nervous. I worry that we're gonna get 5 to 6 projects a year and like only one of them is gonna be good, and honestly that seems to be Disney's conversion rate at the moment. You know, if I could list off the top of my head what I've liked from Disney, and that would be Rogue One, Andor, the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian, and the last season of Clone Wars. Outside of that, they've made a lot of shit. I would just prefer it if these shows that are being made didn't have to intertwine with other things, because then if it's shit, you can just sort of disregard it and you don't have to worry that it's connected to other things. But obviously everything's connected now, so if something is a bit rubbish in one show, then it kind of affects all the other shows a little bit. So it's just a shame. Star Wars is definitely heading down that route, it seems, and I kind of just I just wish George Lucas had never sold it now, because I think it's going to get milked to death, and I think it's going to crash and burn just like Marvel is doing at the moment. Obviously, I have a lot of feelings towards The Mandalorian and how it's turned out, because I think season 1 and 2 just felt like the revival for me. Even if they were still making shit movies and doing some other side projects I didn't like, I always felt The Mandalorian is the one. That didn't disappoint. That was great. That was wholesome. That had my heart. But the third season just really dropped off, and it feels like it's just going down the route of trying to set up other things, and I feel like it lost the heart that it had. Don't get me wrong, season 3 had some good moments. It was fun at times, and visually it is absolutely stunning. But it's missing what made it so great before, and I think it's being done in a rushed attempt to just try and make so much content, and I think it's just, it's taken its first hit on this show, and it's a real shame, because season 1 and 2 were just great. And I think, like I've done with the movies, I just consider 1 to 6 to be the movies, with Rogue One in the middle. I don't go beyond that, and I think I'm going to have to do that with The Mandalorian, and just watch 1 and 2 and then never go beyond that, because it felt like such a nice way to end the story with season 2. Don't get me wrong, when a show's so good, you always think, damn, I would like more, but sometimes you just gotta say no. You just gotta end it and be like, well, it told the story, it ended in a perfect way, and leave it at that. I would give The Mandalorian season 3 a 6 out of 10. It's watchable, it's fun at times, and it looks great, but it really is a disappointment overall, and on the rewatchability rating, I don't see myself ever wanting to rewatch this again. Thank you for watching. If you've seen season 3 of The Mandalorian, please let me know what you think about it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. And I won't leave it another month for a video. I'll be back on it.